The phone rings, and when I pick it up, her voice slices through the years of silence. "You kidnapped my kids." Still, I don't flinch, my hand gripping the receiver as if it's the only thing keeping me grounded. As I look at my grandchildren, my daughter's children, the ones I raised, I feel the weight of her words sinking in. While I'm flooded with memories of her disappearance, the truth settles quietly within me. She's accusing me of stealing them. That's when it hits me. What if I'm the one who's been betrayed all along? We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. I still remember the sound of Jessica's voice that morning, thin, rushed, like she was already halfway out the door before the conversation even began. "Mom, I just need a few days, don't make a big deal out of this." That was all she said before the line clicked dead. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence that felt strangely final. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone long after she hung up, staring through the window at the backyard where Tommy and Lily were chasing each other in circles. Lily's giggle carried through the glass, bright and bubbly, completely unaware of how their world was about to tilt. I pressed my hand against the counter to steady myself, telling my mind not to jump to the worst conclusions. Jessica had always been impulsive, running off, coming back, apologizing, repeating the cycle. I told myself this was just another disappearance in a long line of them, but something inside me felt different, colder. By noon, I saw the first sign that this time wasn't like the others. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway. Her room, always messy, always overflowing with clothes, looked strangely disturbed, like someone had grabbed what they could in a hurry. The closet doors were open, half the hangers were empty. Her old suitcase was gone. I stood there, surrounded by the faint smell of her perfume, and knew with a sinking certainty that something was wrong. I didn't tell the kids yet. Tommy was barely 3, Lily still practically a baby. What could I say? That their mother had walked out again, that I didn't know when or if she'd be back. Instead, I made them lunch, pretending everything was fine even while my stomach churned. Lily kept asking, "Where'd Mommy go?" in her tiny, curious voice, and every time it felt like a bruise blooming deeper inside my chest. The next day, a moving truck showed up. Not mine, not scheduled, not explained. 2 men I'd never seen stepped out and began carrying items from Jessica's room with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. I tried asking questions. "Who sent you? Where is she?" But they only shrugged and offered a name I'd never heard. They had paperwork, vague signatures, and a chilling indifference. They emptied her room in under an hour, leaving behind bare walls and a hollowed-out shell of the space she'd once lived in. When the truck pulled away, the house felt heavier, like the air had thickened with her absence. That evening, the neighborhood started to notice. Seattle has a way of making everything feel closer, houses built a little too tightly, neighbors who share fences and glance into driveways without meaning to. People came by with casseroles and concerned faces, whispering questions they thought I didn't hear. "Did she leave them again? Do you think she'll come back?" Their pity sliced deeper than their speculation. But I refused to believe she would walk away from her children permanently. Jessica had her faults, God knows she was reckless, stubborn, always chasing something just out of reach, but she loved her kids. I'd seen it in the quiet moments, the ones no gossiping neighbor ever saw. I clung to that truth like a life raft. By the third day, the worry calcified into something more like fear. So I called the police, and that's when Detective Sarah Monroe walked into our lives. She arrived in a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, her expression calm but watchful. She had the kind of presence that made you feel both safe and exposed at the same time. She asked questions gently at first, how long Jessica had been gone, whether she'd mentioned anyone new, whether she'd seemed scared or upset. The more I answered, the more her eyes narrowed with quiet concern. She walked through Jessica's empty room, took photos, scribbled notes in a small leather notebook. When she came back downstairs, she paused beside the kids who were sitting on the floor stacking blocks. "I'm going to do everything I can to find your mom," she told them softly. Then she looked at me. "But Maggie, this doesn't look like someone who planned to come back right away." Her words hit with a heaviness that made my knees soften. I nodded, even though something inside me cracked. That night after the kids fell asleep, the house was too quiet. I ked through each room, turning lights on and off like it mattered, like controlling the brightness might somehow control what was happening. I ended up in Jessica's doorway, staring at the emptiness, the carpet indentations where her dresser used to stand. I whispered into the dark, "Where are you, Jess? What did you get yourself into?" And for the first time since she called, a cold thought slithered into my mind, one I tried to push away but couldn't. What if she wasn't coming back at all? That was the moment the phone rang downstairs. A single call. At the worst possible hour. And something in me already knew it wasn't her. The phone call that night didn't bring answers. It brought paperwork, follow-up questions, and the beginning of a long, silent stretch of years that forced all three of us to grow up in ways we never planned. Now, sitting at the dining table 13 years later, watching Detective Monroe lay out her files like puzzle pieces, I felt the echo of that first, hollow night settle somewhere deep in my bones. Tommy sat across from her, taller than I ever imagined he'd get, his shoulders squared but tense. 16 now, wearing that mix of boyish uncertainty and the stubborn edge of someone who's carried more than he should. Monroe spoke gently, but her voice still carried weight as she asked him about those early days, what he remembered, what he felt, what he thought happened to his mother. He rubbed his thumb along the seam of his jeans, not looking at her. "I don't remember much," he said quietly, "just pieces." He hesitated, and for a second he looked at me, almost apologizing with his eyes. "I remember Mom leaving, or maybe I just remember everyone telling me she did." That landed harder than he intended. I swallowed, keeping my face steady. Detective Monroe didn't flinch. "It's okay if your memories are mixed, that happens. I'm more interested in how you felt growing up, the gaps, the questions." Tommy exhaled long and slow. "I guess I just wanted someone to tell me the truth, not the 'she'll come home when she's ready' stuff, not the 'your mom loves you' speeches." He picked at a corner of a notebook. "I wanted facts, but nobody had them." I felt every word like a quiet indictment, not cruel, not unfair, just honest. Lily sat beside me, her legs tucked under her, her 13-year-old frame folded inward as if she could shrink herself into the chair. She didn't speak yet, she never spoke first. She watched Tommy, then Monroe, then me, searching for cues the way she always had. Growing up, Lily clung to me in ways Tommy never did. She barely remembered Jessica, just flashes of a scent, the shape of a laugh, shadows of a face she wasn't sure belonged to memory or imagination. I became the anchor she wrapped her world around, and I held her as tightly as I could. Some nights when she was little, she used to fall asleep on my chest, her tiny fingers tucked into my shirt like she was stitching herself into me. But now she looked older, not grown but stretched emotionally, mentally by the weight of a story she never chose. Monroe eventually turned to her. "Lily, can you tell me how it felt growing up without your mom?" Lily's voice was soft. It felt normal. She paused, then shook her head. "That sounds bad, I just mean Grandma was there, always. I didn't feel like something was missing until other kids asked about it or teachers did. And even then I didn't know what to say." Her eyes darted to me. "I only know what she told me." She wasn't accusing me, but it stung anyway. After Monroe wrapped up the interviews, she asked for a few minutes alone with me. The kids went upstairs, Tommy disappearing into his room with the heavy-footed stomp of a boy trying to be a man, Lily drifting behind him quietly. Monroe closed her folder, her expression thoughtful. "They've handled all this better than most kids would." "That's generous," I murmured. "Some days I think I barely held us together." "You did," she said simply. I looked toward the staircase, listening to the creaks of old wood settling. I tried to give them stability, structure, love. Whatever I lacked as a mother with Jessica, I tried to make up for with them. Monroe studied me. "You gave up a lot." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked around the dining room, the homework charts Lily used to color in, the nicks on the table from the time Tommy tried to carve his initials, the framed photos lining the wall, each one documenting how I traded my quiet retirement plans for school drop-offs and teenage arguments and family dinners that never ended the way they began. "My career, my savings, my time, my sleep," I finally said with a small, tired laugh. "But they needed someone, and I couldn't let them float in the dark like she did." Monroe's voice dropped. "Maggie, have you ever considered the possibility that Jessica didn't just run from life, that maybe she ran from you too?" The question sliced through the room. For a second I didn't breathe. I stared at her. "Why would she?" "Because sometimes," she said gently, "people disappear from the places they feel most judged." The air shifted colder, tighter. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth sat there uncomfortably close. Jessica had been running from someone, something, but what if part of that shadow had been me? Monroe stood, gathering her files. "I'll be back in a few days with updates." As she walked out, Tommy appeared at the top of the stairs, his voice hesitant. "Grandma, can we talk? It's about Mom." I froze. Because the look in his eyes wasn't confusion this time. It was suspicion. Tommy stood in the hallway with that look, half accusation, half fear, and before I could get a word out, the doorbell cut through the house like a blade. One sharp chime, too sharp, too familiar in the way it made my stomach knot. "I'll get it," I said, even though my throat had gone dry. The porch light spilled across the front steps as I pulled the door open, and for a moment my mind refused to make sense of what I was seeing. 13 years had carved themselves into her face, softening some edges, hardening others. Her hair was darker, shorter. Her eyes were the same, restless, darting, always searching for an escape. "Hi, Mom." My knees almost buckled. "Jessica." She smirked like it was a punchline she'd been waiting for me to react to. "You look surprised." I stepped outside, closing the door partway behind me as if I could shield the kids from her sudden reappearance. "Surprised? Jessica, you vanished, you." "I didn't vanish," her voice sharpened instantly. "You took them." My heart stuttered. "What?" "You took them from me, you kept them, don't act clueless." I stared at her, trying to read her expression, searching for any sign that this was grief speaking or trauma or guilt, but she looked almost prepared, rehearsed. "Jessica," I whispered, "you left them with me, you called, you said. I never gave you permission to raise my kids." Her voice cracked, not with sadness but fury. "You decided I was unfit, you kept them away from me, you made them think I didn't care." My breath hitched. "That's not true, you disappeared, you packed your things, movers came." "I didn't send anyone." She stepped closer, her jaw tight. "But you let them empty my room, didn't you? Convenient." A cold unease slid down my spine. "What are you talking about? I tried to find you, Detective Monroe." "Oh, I know all about her," she snapped. "She's been looking for me too, but I'm here now and I want my kids back." The door creaked behind me. "Tommy." He stepped out onto the porch like he was wading into unknown terrain. Lily hovered behind him, half hidden, her fingers twisted into the hem of her sweatshirt. Jessica's breath hitched when she saw them, but it wasn't the gasp of a mother reuniting with her children. It was sharper, hungrier, like she'd spotted something she intended to reclaim. "Tommy," she said, voice softening for the first time, "look at you, you're God, you're almost a man." Tommy didn't move, didn't smile, his shoulders tightened. "Where have you been?" Her jaw clenched. "It's complicated, but none of it changes the fact that your grandmother stole you." Lily's tiny whisper cut through the tension. "Grandma didn't steal us." Jessica's face twisted. "Because she raised you to believe that, she poisoned you against me." "That's enough," I said, stepping between her and the kids. "Don't talk to them like that." "Oh, now you're protective?" Her laugh was bitter. "You didn't think twice before taking over my life, my role, my children." My pulse pounded in my ears. "I stepped in because you were gone, you left." "Stop saying that," she burst forward, glaring at me inches from my face. "You don't get to rewrite the story, you never have." Tommy flinched at her tone. Lily grabbed his arm. I felt something inside me fracture. The years of bedtime stories, of fevers at 2 a.m., of scraped knees and school plays and grief-filled milestones, they all rose up like a shield I didn't know how to hold steady. "I raised them because I had to," I said quietly, "because they needed someone and you were nowhere." Jessica's eyes flickered, guilt, pain, I couldn't tell. Just as quickly the emotion snapped shut. "I'm not doing this here," she said, stepping back. "But listen carefully, Mom, I'm taking them back legally. You had no right to keep them from me." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Jessica, you think you're the hero in this story," she hissed, "but soon enough everyone will know what you did." She turned and walked down the steps, her pace brisk, almost triumphant. The engine of a car idled at the curb, someone waiting for her. She slid inside without looking back. Tommy whispered, "Grandma, what does she mean? Did you?" "No," I said instantly, but my voice cracked. And that tiny crack, thin, almost invisible, was enough to plant a seed of doubt I could see taking root in his expression. "Ellie." Wiley pressed herself into my side, trembling. Why was she angry? I had no answer. But as the car disappeared around the corner, headlights cutting through the dark, one truth settled over me like a cold fog. Jessica wasn't just back. She'd returned with a war already loaded and aimed. And we were the target. By the next morning, Jessica's threat wasn't just echoing in my head, it had grown legs, marched into my world, and rooted itself in every corner of the house. I woke to an email from a law office I'd never heard of, cold and formal, informing me that Jessica Lawson had filed an emergency petition for custody of Tommy and Lily. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. By noon, I was sitting across from my own attorney, David Brower, a man with silver hair and tired eyes who looked like he'd spent his entire career dragging families through their worst days. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything: Jessica's disappearance, the years of silence, her sudden return, and her accusation that I'd somehow stolen my own grandchildren. When I finished, he leaned forward, folding his hands. "Maggie, these cases get messy fast, especially when the biological parent resurfaces." His voice softened. "But I'll be honest, your history with the kids, your consistency, your home, those things matter." I wanted that to comfort me, it didn't. Because the real storm wasn't coming from the courts, it was coming from inside my own house. Tommy barely spoke to me that entire day. He'd retreated into his room, headphones on, blinds drawn. When I finally knocked after dinner, he didn't yell or argue, he just opened the door with that same quiet, wounded look Jessica used to get when she thought the world was ganging up on her. "Can we talk?" I asked. He nodded, but the distance between us felt miles wide. "She said you took us," he murmured, eyes fixed on the carpet. "She said you made sure we'd never see her." "That's not true," I said, too quickly, too desperately. "She left, I did my best to." "But what if she did?" His voice cracked. "What if something happened? What if she tried to come back and you know?" "Tommy," I whispered, "I never kept her from you." He looked up then, and the doubt in his eyes felt like a knife twisting under my ribs. "I just want the truth, Grandma, that's all I've ever wanted." Before I could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway, cheeks puffy from crying, clutching her stuffed rabbit, the one she hadn't touched in years. "Grandma," she whispered, "is Mommy mad at us?" That broke me. I wrapped her in my arms, but she felt different, tense, conflicted, as though part of her was being pulled in a direction she didn't understand. The child who once fit so neatly against me suddenly held herself like she was afraid to choose a side. By the end of the week, Detective Monroe was back at my dining table, flipping through her old case notes and new documents Jessica's lawyer had submitted. She looked more grim than I'd ever seen her. "Jessica's attorney is arguing that you knew more than you disclosed," she said, "that you created obstacles that kept her from returning." My breath caught. "That's absurd." "I know," she said carefully, "but in court, narrative matters." She glanced toward the stairs. "You should be prepared for her team to paint you as overbearing, controlling." A cold realization crawled up my spine. Jessica was building a case, one that weaponized every failure I'd ever had as a mother, every argument we'd ever had, every moment she'd claimed I didn't understand her. David, my lawyer, began collecting everything we had: old emails Jessica never answered, the missing person reports, the evidence that movers had taken her things without explanation. He even tracked down neighbors who remembered those strange men and their evasive answers. He moved methodically, assembling a portrait of a woman who'd left voluntarily and a grandmother who'd stepped in out of necessity, not ambition. But Jessica didn't wait quietly. 3 days after she served the papers, a local news van parked across the street. Mothers reclaiming stolen children. Grandmothers accused of long-term kidnapping. My name on the evening broadcast, simplified into something sensational and grotesque. I stood by the kitchen window watching the cameras as if they were vultures circling something already dying. Lily hovered behind me, chewing her nails. Tommy paced the living room, avoiding the windows entirely. Everything felt like it was spiraling, fast, uncontrollable. That night, as I tried to coax Lily into sleeping in her own bed, she whispered, "What if Mommy takes us away?" I stroked her hair, my voice trembling. "No one is taking you away, sweetheart." But I wasn't sure anymore. When I finally stepped into the hallway, I found Tommy waiting at the top of the stairs. He looked pale, nervous, like he'd been carrying something heavy and trying to pretend it didn't hurt. "Grandma," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." My chest tightened. "What is it?" He swallowed hard. "Mom, she told me something today, something about why she disappeared." My heart slammed against my ribs. And she said, his voice dropped to a whisper, that you wouldn't want me to know. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Tommy stood at the top of the stairs, the hallway light behind him turning him into a shadow with my grandson's voice. Mom, she told me something today, something about why she disappeared. He swallowed, and she said you wouldn't want me to know. My hand tightened on the banister. Tommy, that's not. She said you made it impossible for her to stay, he cut in, voice trembling but steady. That you hated the person she was with, that you threatened to take us if she didn't leave him, so she ran and then you did exactly what you threatened to do. My mouth went dry. I knew exactly who he was talking about, I just never thought his name would crawl back into our house after all these years. Your mother, I said slowly, is leaving out a lot of details. Tommy's eyes flashed. Maybe, but you never told me any details, you just called it a bad decision and changed the subject every time I asked. He wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the way, protecting them had turned into avoiding certain truths. Tommy, it was more than a bad decision, I said. He was dangerous. His jaw tightened. That's what people always say when they don't like someone. I felt something inside me buckle. I didn't just not like him. I watched your mother come home with bruises she tried to hide. I watched her lie for him. I watched him scream at her in our driveway. I watched him put his hands on her so hard I thought he'd. My voice broke. You were too young, but I was. Tommy stared at me like he was trying to see if I was finally telling the truth, or just a different version of a lie. Did you threaten to take us? He asked quietly. I closed my eyes. I told her if he ever laid a hand on you or Lily, I'd go to court, I'd fight for custody, I stand by that. He flinched like the words hit him physically, so she was right. She twisted it, I said, stepping toward him. That's what he did to her, twisted everything. She started believing his version of me more than her own. He dropped his gaze, shoulders sagging. I don't know what to believe. He went into his room and shut the door, not loud, not dramatic, just final. That was somehow worse. I lay awake most of the night, the past pressing against the dark like it was trying to break through the walls. By dawn, I couldn't stand it anymore. I got up, made coffee I didn't drink, and found myself staring down the hallway toward the one place I'd avoided for years. The attic. Jessica's things, what was left of them anyway, were up there. I'd packed the remains into boxes the year after she vanished, telling myself I'd donate them someday. I never did. Dust floated in the thin shafts of light as I pulled the cord and climbed the creaking ladder. The air smelled like old cardboard and insulation. I found the boxes with her name scrawled on the side in my own handwriting and dragged one toward me, my knees protesting the movement. Inside, clothes, a tangle of jewelry, a few framed photos she didn't take with her. A concert ticket, receipts. I dug deeper, fingers brushing against something worn and soft at the bottom. A notebook, black spiral-bound, corners bent. The cover had a faint ring from an old coffee mug. My heart started pounding. I knew that notebook. She used to carry it everywhere when she was younger, scribbling thoughts and doodles and half-finished song lyrics. But this one was heavier with something else. When I opened it, the first page had her handwriting in big block letters. If anything happens to me, this is why. My hands shook so badly I had to steady the book against my knees. The entries started about 6 months before she vanished. At first, they were typical Jessica, restless, dramatic, emotional, but within a few pages, the tone shifted. He says we're meant to be, says Mom never understood me, says she's trying to ruin everything. He got mad tonight because I answered a call from Mom, threw my phone across the room, said she's poison, said if I go back to her he'll make sure I regret it. I keep seeing his temper, the way he looks at the kids sometimes like they're in the way. I can't breathe when he gets like that. Then, he said he knows where Mom lives, that he could fix the problem if I let him. I told him never to talk about her like that again. He laughed and it scared me more than anything. My stomach turned, I flipped pages faster. I'm scared, I'm so scared, I don't know who to trust. If I leave him, he'll come after me. If I stay, I'm afraid he'll hurt the kids. Mom keeps threatening court, he keeps threatening worse. I feel trapped between two people who think they know what's best for me. I think I have to go disappear just for a while until he gives up or until I can figure something out. But if I tell Mom, she'll try to stop me, she'll try to take the kids. I can't let him near them, I can't risk it. Better they hate me than bury me. The last entries were frantic, short, scared. He sent guys to the house today to clear out my mess. I didn't ask him to, Mom must have freaked out. I'm staying with someone he doesn't know, I don't want him near the kids. If Mom is reading this someday, I'm sorry, I know you think I abandoned them, but I left so they wouldn't get caught in his crosshairs. Please keep them safe, even if they hate me for it. Tears blurred the ink. For 13 years I'd carried one story, that Jessica ran from responsibility, from motherhood, from me. Now I was staring at another story entirely. A woman cornered by a dangerous man, hiding and cutting ties because she believed it was the only way to protect her children from him. And maybe from me too, from my stubborn certainty, my threats, my refusal to see how scared she really was. I brought the journal to David that afternoon. He read in silence, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. When he finished, he exhaled slowly. This changes things, he said. It shows she was in danger and that you didn't know the full picture. It also shows she asked you indirectly to protect the kids. Will it help? I asked. It could, he said, but it also exposes a lot. Her choices, yours, that man. If we bring this into court, nothing stays buried. Tommy read parts of it later, standing at the kitchen counter, eyes red, knuckles white. She was scared, he whispered. Why didn't she tell you? Because I didn't make it easy to be honest, I admitted. Lily clung to my arm as I read some of the gentler entries to her, Jessica describing her as my sunshine, describing Tommy as my brave boy. Lily's tears soaked through my sleeve. So she did love us, she said, almost in awe. She always did, I said. She just made terrible choices trying to protect you. The first court date after that felt different. Tighter. The courtroom was too bright, too cold, the air buzzing with whispers and the scratching of pens. Jessica sat at the other table, her lawyer beside her, chin lifted like she was bracing for a storm. I could see it in her eyes when David mentioned new written evidence, panic, anger, fear, all tangled together. The judge adjusted his glasses. Ms. Lawson, counsel suggests there are written records from before your disappearance that shed light on your state of mind. Is that correct? Jessica's gaze flicked to me, then to the journal on David's table. For the first time since she'd come back, she looked genuinely afraid. Because this wasn't just about who took the kids anymore. It was about everything we'd all tried to bury. And as the judge asked David to approach with the journal in hand, one thought crashed over me like a wave. Telling the truth might finally save us. Or it might be the thing that tears us apart for good. The journal changed the air around the case, but it didn't settle anything. If anything, it stirred everything up again, old wounds, old suspicions, the kind of tension that made every hallway conversation feel like navigating a minefield. Even David looked wary the next morning as we entered the courthouse, as if he knew the other shoe was about to drop. He just didn't know from where. We didn't have to wait long to find out. Detective Monroe caught up with us before the hearing, her expression carved out of stone. She moved with that stiff, purposeful stride she only used when something was very, very wrong. Maggie, she said quietly, we need to talk. My stomach dipped. What now? She glanced toward the courtroom door where Jessica and her lawyer were already taking their seats. Not here, 5 minutes, outs. The hallway smelled like old carpet cleaner and nerves. Monroe checked both ends of the corridor before speaking, lowering her voice to a level that made my skin prickle. I dug into the men who cleared out Jessica's room the day she disappeared, she said. The ones you saw, the ones who wouldn't answer questions. A chill slid down my spine. And they weren't movers, she said. They were affiliated with a local crew tied to organized crime, lower-level guys, muscle-for-hire types. The same crew her boyfriend was mixed up with. I stared at her, trying to make sense of the words, organized crime. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, she said, more like a criminal network that does enforcement, debt collection, intimidation. Jessica's boyfriend was tied to them through some old gambling debts. When he couldn't pay, they used him and everything connected to him as leverage. Tommy's voice echoed in my memory. What if something happened? What if she tried to come back and you know? I grabbed the wall for balance. You're saying the men who emptied her room were connected to them? Yes, Monroe said. And that journal you found, it lines up with what they were doing at the time. They were known for forcing people to disappear, either to hide them or to control them. So she didn't leave to punish me, I whispered. She left because she thought those men might come after the kids. Monroe nodded tightly. She didn't run from motherhood. She ran from a threat she didn't trust you or anyone to stop. My heart twisted, guilt and grief tangled into something sharp. I thought she was reckless, I murmured. Selfish, I thought she didn't want them. She wanted them alive, Monroe said. There's a difference. But the relief of that truth was immediately swallowed by something darker. Because if Jessica hadn't been lying, then I had built my entire narrative, the one I'd lived with, raised the kids with, on a foundation that wasn't just incomplete. It was wrong. Inside the courtroom, Jessica's lawyer pounced the moment Monroe handed her findings to the judge. Your Honor, he said with that falsely polite tone slick enough to slip on, this only reinforces our claim that Ms. Lawson's children were taken from her. She was in danger. She fled to keep them safe. And Mrs. Lawson, he shot me a thin smile, had every reason to know that. David stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. That is not only inaccurate, it's deliberately misleading. My client had no knowledge of any criminal threat. She believed her daughter left voluntarily because there was no communication, no contact, nothing. Convenient, Jessica's lawyer said, especially since she threatened to seek full custody before Ms. Lawson vanished. I felt Tommy stiffen behind me. Lily squeezed my hand until it hurt. The judge raised a hand for silence. These new revelations complicate matters. The court will need time to examine them. But the damage was already done. Outside, the kids pulled away from me in opposite directions, Tommy drifting toward Jessica, Lily toward me with wide, confused eyes. Tommy watched the exchange between the attorneys with his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. So Mom really was running, he said under his breath, and you didn't know. No, I said, my voice barely steady, I didn't. It just feels like if you told me more back then, maybe I'd understand better now. I told you what I believed, I whispered, what I thought was true. He nodded, but the hurt sat between us like a wall neither of us could see over. Lily, meanwhile, hovered at my side, her voice trembling. Grandma, Mom looked scared today, really scared. I followed Lily's gaze. Jessica stood a few yards away, arms wrapped around herself, looking younger, smaller than she had since she returned. For the first time, she wasn't glaring at me, she wasn't fighting. She was crying. Our eyes met and something flickered across her face, regret maybe, or recognition, the brief acknowledgement that she had blamed me for things I hadn't known, for dangers I hadn't caused. But just as quickly as it surfaced, she looked away. Later that night, as I sat alone at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of me, I finally let myself feel it, the crushing weight of realizing I had never truly understood my daughter's fear, her choices, her disappearance. Not then. Maybe not even now. I closed the journal gently, my hands trembling. And that was when a soft knock came at the back door. Slow, hesitant. When I opened it, Jessica stood there, no lawyer, no bravado, no armor, just my daughter, eyes red, shoulders shaking. I need to tell you something, she whispered, something I never told anyone. My heart lurched. Because the look on her face told me this secret, whatever it was, might be worse than anything written in that journal. Jessica didn't tell me her secret that night. She tried, her lips parted, her hands trembling at her sides, but the sound of a car slowing outside snapped her out of whatever moment of honesty she'd worked up the courage for. She backed away, wiped her face, and murmured, tomorrow. In court. Then she left me standing there with the journal open on the table like a wound that refused to close. So when morning came, I wasn't just exhausted, I was rattled to my core. The courthouse steps were swarmed, journalists, cameras, microphones shoved out like weapons. David kept his hand on my back, guiding me inside before anyone could fire questions at me. Jessica arrived minutes later, her lawyer at her side, her eyes rimmed red. She didn't look at me, but I saw the tension in the way she held her shoulders, as if she were bracing for the moment her entire life went under a microscope. Inside the courtroom, everything felt sharper, the lights brighter, the wood colder, even the air had weight. The bailiff called order, and David stood first. He walked to the center with the slow, steady steps of a man who knew how dangerous missteps could be. "Your Honor," he began, "my client Margaret Lawson acted out of necessity, not malice. 13 years ago, her daughter Jessica left her children without explanation. Mrs. Lawson stepped in because she had to, and she raised Tommy and Lily with consistency, care, and stability." He lifted the journal gently from the table. "Furthermore, new written evidence shows Jessica left because she feared for her life. She did what she felt she had to do, and my client, unaware of those circumstances, did what any responsible guardian would do. She protected those children." Jessica's lawyer rose before David even stepped back. "Your Honor, this journal, if authentic, proves my client left under duress, but it does not absolve Mrs. Lawson of her role. She didn't simply step in. She kept these children from their mother. She painted Jessica as reckless, irresponsible, even dangerous. And for what? To secure her place as their primary caregiver." He turned, gesturing at me with a subtle, cutting motion. Mrs. Lawson blurred the line between protection and possession. My jaw tightened. I wanted to stand, to defend myself, to say the words that had been stuck in my chest since Jessica reappeared. "I never tried to take your place." But the court wasn't interested in outbursts. It wanted evidence. And it wanted testimony. The judge called Tommy first. Tommy walked to the stand with the unease of someone stepping into a spotlight he didn't ask for. He wore his best shirt, the one I'd ironed for him when he was younger. It didn't make him look like a child anymore. It made him look like someone caught between two worlds he didn't know how to navigate. The bailiff swore him in, and he sat, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles went white. "Tommy," the judge said gently, "tell us in your own words how this situation affected you." Tommy inhaled shakily. "I grew up thinking my mom left because she didn't want us. Grandma never said that outright, but she didn't stop us from believing it." He paused, looked at me, his eyes flickered with apology. "But she didn't lie either, she just didn't know the truth, and she raised us, she did everything for us." His voice cracked. "I love my grandma, I wouldn't be who I am without her, but I also want to know my mom, I want to understand why she left, I don't want to lose either of them." The judge nodded, taking notes. Jessica's lawyer approached. "Tommy, do you believe your grandmother intentionally kept you from your mother?" Tommy's jaw tightened. "I think she did what she thought was right, I just wish she'd told us more." It hit hard because it was fair. Then it was Lily's turn. She trembled as she walked up, clutching her rabbit in one hand. The courtroom softened at the sight of her. She was so young, so visibly torn. When she took her seat, she swung her legs lightly as if it grounded her. "Lily," the judge said gently, "how do you feel about your grandmother and your mother?" Her eyes filled instantly. "I love them both. Grandma raised me, she helped me with my nightmares and my homework and everything." She swallowed. "But Mommy, she looks so sad now, and I don't want her to be sad." Jessica wiped her cheek. I looked down at my own hands. "Do you want to live with one of them more than the other?" the judge asked softly. Lily shook her head with a small, panicked motion. "I want both." The courtroom went quiet. Even Jessica's lawyer didn't push her further. How could he? When the kids stepped down, I felt drained. Every bit of truth we'd avoided for 13 years had just been exposed under the hottest lights possible. Finally, the judge spoke. "I have heard compelling testimony from both sides. This case is complex, emotional, and it involves children who clearly love everyone involved. I will need time to weigh the evidence, particularly the journal, which requires authentication and investigation." His pen tapped lightly against the bench. "In the meantime, both children will remain under Mrs. Lawson's care, with temporary visitation rights granted to Ms. Lawson." Jessica gasped, so did Tommy. Lily squeezed my arm. But then the judge added quietly, "Further decisions will depend on new evidence." And that was when the courtroom doors burst open. Detective Monroe strode in, pale, breathless, holding a folder clutched so tightly her knuckles blanched. "Your Honor," she said loudly, "I apologize for the interruption, but this couldn't wait." The judge frowned. "Detective Monroe, what is this?" She stepped forward. A breakthrough, she said. About the night Jessica disappeared. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. Because the look on Monroe's face wasn't grim. It was terrified. Detective Monroe's folder never made it into evidence that afternoon. The judge called an immediate recess, sentencing all of us to a hallway thick with tension and unanswered questions. Lawyers murmured in corners, Jessica stood shaking near a column, and the kids hovered close but not close enough, each of them orbiting me with a wary distance I could feel more than see. By the time we were dismissed for the day, the judge's only official decision was to delay the verdict until Monroe's new findings could be verified. But the unofficial damage, that had already begun. The minute we stepped outside the courthouse, Tommy pulled away from me, the way Jessica used to when she didn't want me to see her cry. He shoved his hands into his pockets, shoulders rigid. "Tommy, wait," I said, reaching for him. He stopped, but only barely. "Grandma, why didn't you tell me everything? The custody stuff, the fights, the threats, all of it." "I didn't want you burdened with things you couldn't understand at the time," I said softly. He shook his head. "But I'm not a kid now, and it feels like everyone's been deciding what I should know, Mom, you, even Detective Monroe." There was no accusation in his voice, it was worse. There was disappointment, a quiet, simmering resentment that felt heavier than anger. "Tommy, I told you what I believed, what I knew. But you never questioned it," his voice broke. "You never considered you might be wrong." That hit harder than anything his mother had thrown at me. Before I could respond, Lily slipped her hand out of mine. She stood a little ahead with Jessica, who was kneeling to brush hair out of her face. The gesture was so gentle, so maternal, it twisted something inside my chest. "Mommy, are we going home with you?" Lily asked in a trembling whisper. Jessica froze. "Not yet, baby, but soon, okay? I'm fighting for you." Lily nodded, small and fragile, and then, without even glancing back at me, she stepped into Jessica's arms. It felt like watching someone pull the foundation out from under a house I'd spent 13 years building. At home, the silence was different than the silence 13 years ago. Back then, it was filled with fear of the unknown, fear of Jessica vanishing forever. Now it was filled with something else. Doubt. Everywhere. Tommy kept to himself, pacing his room, opening and closing drawers as if looking for a truth he'd misplaced and needed to find before someone else found it first. When we crossed paths in the hall, he gave me a quick, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lily hovered by the front window, watching for Jessica's car even though we'd already dropped her home. When I made dinner, neither child sat beside me like they always did. Tommy ate standing up. Lily picked at her food in silence, eyes far away, her rabbit tucked under her arm like a baby she suddenly needed to cradle again. The house felt full of ghosts. Later that night, the doorbell rang. My heart jolted, but it was just Jessica. Alone. She stood on the porch in a coat that looked too thin for the weather, her arms wrapped tightly around her waist. She looked tired, not angry this time, not defensive. Just tired. "Maggie," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside and she came in, her eyes flicking toward the stairs where the kids slept. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I didn't want them to hate you, I was just so scared, and when I came back I panicked. I said things I shouldn't have." The apology sat uneasily between us, too late, too fragile, but still something. "I know I abandoned them," she said, voice cracking. "I know I abandoned you, and I'll be sorry for that for the rest of my life." "Jessica," my voice trembled, "why didn't you tell me everything about him, about what was really going on?" She met my eyes. "Because you always tried to fix me, and I didn't think you could fix him. I didn't want you dying on that hill." Her honesty hit me like a punch, because I would have fought him. I would have gone to war for her even if it killed me. She looked away, wiping a tear. "I still want my kids back, I have to fight for that, but I don't want it to be because they're scared of you or confused about me." I nodded even though it tore something inside me. "Jessica," I whispered, "I don't know if they'll ever see me the same way, not after all this." She swallowed. "Maybe not, but maybe that's not the point anymore. The point is them, always them." Her words were fragile, but they were the closest thing to peace we'd had in weeks. I almost reached for her hand. Almost. But then upstairs, a floorboard creaked. We both looked up. A moment later, Tommy appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes red, expression unreadable, as if he'd been listening for a while. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking, "is it true?" Jessica stiffened. "Is what true?" Tommy stepped down one stair, then another, clutching the railing like it was the only solid thing left. "That man you were with," he said, "the crew, the threats, everything." Jessica's face drained of color. He swallowed hard. Did they come after us because of you?" Jessica's breath hitched. And then slowly, painfully, she nodded. Jessica's nod hung in the air like a fracture, silent, irreversible. Tommy didn't cry, he didn't yell, he just stood there absorbing the truth the way only a 16-year-old boy could, with a mixture of heartbreak and a dawning, reluctant understanding. But it didn't heal us. Not yet. By the next morning, he'd barely spoken to either of us. Lily clung to Jessica through breakfast, refusing to sit in her usual seat beside me, and Jessica, exhausted, hollowed out, left before the sun had fully risen, telling me quietly that she needed space before the next hearing. I needed space too, but instead I got Detective Monroe. She called just after 10. "Maggie," she said, voice low, purposeful, "I found something. I need to see you now." There was no room in that tone for questions. I drove to the precinct, palms damp against the steering wheel. Monroe met me in a small conference room, blinds half closed, a file on the table between us. She didn't sit. She stood, shoulders drawn tight, eyes fixed on me like she was preparing to deliver a blow. "Before her disappearance," she said, "Jessica reached out to someone we never identified before, because the message was never sent." My breath caught. "What message?" Monroe opened the file. Inside, wrapped in a clear evidence sleeve, was a single piece of paper, yellowed slightly at the edges, folded and refolded until it looked ready to tear apart. "I found this in an old lockbox tied to Jessica's boyfriend's apartment," Monroe said. "It was logged as a personal item, never cataloged with the rest. It was overlooked, probably intentionally." I stared at the paper. Addressed in Jessica's handwriting. "To Mom." My knees almost gave out. Monroe slid the evidence sleeve toward me. "It's yours to read. I'll step outside." She didn't wait for me to respond. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat, hands trembling, as I pulled the letter halfway from the sleeve. Her handwriting hit me first, messy, rushed, uneven. Jessica only wrote like that when she was terrified. "Mom, if you're reading this, I don't know if I'm alive anymore." The room went cold. He found out I was planning to leave. He said he'd hurt the kids to punish me. I didn't know what else to do. I thought disappearing would protect them, but I'm running out of places to hide. My throat tightened until it hurt. "I know you think I'm irresponsible, and maybe I am, but please believe me, I'm doing this because I love them, because he told me he'd come for them next. I need you to take care of Tommy and Lily, even if you think I abandoned them, even if they grow up hating me." A tear splashed onto the page, distorting the ink. "I wanted to bring them with me, but the risk was too big. I couldn't keep them safe. You always could." My breath hitched. "I'm sorry for the years we lost. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you, but please don't let him win. Protect them, even if that means protecting them from me." It ended there. No signature. Just a shaky, unfinished line, like she'd been interrupted. I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself cry, silent, aching tears for a daughter I'd misunderstood, for a mother I'd failed to be when she needed me most, for two children who were trapped in a storm they never asked for. When Monroe returned, I looked up at her, my voice barely steady. "Why didn't anyone find this?" "I think someone didn't want it found," she said. "But it's real. Forensic authentication already came back positive. It's Jessica's handwriting, dated 2 days before she disappeared." A long, fragile silence settled between us. "Does she know this letter exists?" I asked. "No," Monroe said. "I wanted you to see it first." Back home, I placed the letter on the kitchen island, smoothing the creases as if the paper itself needed comfort. Tommy walked in moments later, hoodie half-zipped, expression guarded. He froze when he saw the evidence sleeve. "What's that?" I handed it to him. He read slowly at first, then faster. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. When he finished, he swallowed hard, staring at the letter like it was something alive. "She wrote this," he whispered. "Yes," I said softly, before she disappeared. Tommy wiped at his eyes roughly like he didn't want to let the tears fall, but they did anyway. "She wasn't running from us," he murmured. "She was running for us." He folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and handed it back. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for doubting you, for everything." I brushed his hair back. "You had every right to question everything, sweetheart, we all did." Then Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her rabbit, eyes wide. "Mommy said she's scared you'll take us away again." The words sliced through the fragile moment like a blade. "Lily," I whispered, "I would never take you away, never." She looked torn, her little face twisted in confusion, caught between the woman who raised her and the woman whose blood she carried. "I wish," she said, voice trembling, "I wish I didn't have to pick." My heart cracked. "You don't," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Courtrooms force choices, judges force choices, circumstances force choices. We were all tangled in a web none of us asked for. At the next court hearing, David stood ready with the letter in hand. Jessica hadn't seen it yet. Her lawyer hadn't seen it. The judge hadn't seen it. But when the envelope slid across the table and the judge lifted it, unfolding Jessica's words for the first time, I saw Jessica's face drain of color. Her hand flew to her mouth. A soft, strangled sound escaped her, half gasp, half sob. And I knew that whatever came next in this courtroom, nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The courtroom felt different that morning, as if every bench, every light, every wooden surface knew we were nearing an end. Not the end of the pain or the questions or the years of complicated history between us, but an end to the battle that had dragged all four of us through a storm none of us were built for. Jessica walked in first with her lawyer, her posture stiff but her eyes swollen, rimmed red from a night I suspected she spent reliving every word in that letter. She didn't look at me, she didn't look at the kids. She stared at the defense table like she could anchor herself there. Tommy and Lily sat beside me, close but not touching. Tommy had the letter folded in his pocket, fingers brushing it now and then like he needed the physical reminder. Lily held her rabbit, its ears worn from her grip. When the gavel struck, it echoed with finality. "Counsel," the judge said, "you may proceed with closing arguments." David stood first, calm, measured. The man had aged 10 years in the past week and somehow still looked like the only adult in the room. "Your Honor," he began, "the letter you reviewed yesterday demonstrates the truth my client has insisted on for 13 years. Jessica Lawson left out of fear, not negligence, not selfishness. Fear for her safety and the safety of her children. She asked explicitly for her mother to protect Tommy and Lily." He held up the evidence sleeve. "This letter proves she never intended to abandon them permanently. It also proves that Mrs. Lawson did what any responsible caregiver would do in the absence of communication. She cared for the children as if they were her own." Jessica's lawyer rose with almost theatrical slowness. "Yes, Your Honor, my client wrote that letter in fear, in desperation, but that does not erase what happened afterward. Mrs. Lawson took control. She enrolled herself as the primary guardian. She told the children their mother was gone, and while she may not have said Jessica was dangerous, she allowed them to believe it." He turned toward me. "Influence," he said pointedly, "can be just as powerful as words." I clenched my hands in my lap. I didn't trust myself to speak, not yet, not here. Every word felt like a weapon that could blow open the wrong wound. "Your Honor," the lawyer continued, "my client wants her children back. She acknowledges her mistakes, but she deserves a chance to repair what fear stole from her." The judge nodded slowly and then looked toward Tommy. "Son, I'd like to hear from you again." Tommy swallowed, standing. I watched him walk to the stand with the same heaviness he carried when he'd first learned his mother wasn't a ghost, but a woman trapped in her own nightmare. "Tommy," the judge said gently, "how do you feel now, knowing everything you've learned over the past few days?" Tommy blinked. Head hard, steadying himself. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. My mom left because she was scared, and I get that now, but Grandma, she didn't lie to me. She didn't know the truth either. She raised us." His voice cracked. "She never tried to replace my mom. She just tried to keep us safe." He looked at Jessica then, eyes softening. "I want a relationship with you. I want that so much, but I don't want to lose Grandma either." The judge nodded. "Thank you." Then it was Lily's turn. She walked slowly, rabbit pressed to her chest, eyes wide and damp. "Lily," the judge said kindly, "how do you feel about all this?" She sniffed. "I love them both. They're both my moms," but her voice wavered. "I don't want to live without either of them. I want to know the truth. I want to know why Mommy left. I want to know why Grandma was so scared. I just want everyone to stop fighting." For a moment, even Jessica's lawyer looked shaken. Then the judge called Jessica to the stand. She hesitated but stood. She walked with slow, careful steps like she trusted the ground only one step at a time. On the stand, her voice was barely audible. "I left because I was afraid." Her gaze flicked to the letter, then to her children. "And I know that leaving hurt them. I know it hurt you, Mom." Her voice trembled. "I never meant for any of that. I was trying to protect them. I didn't want to drag them into the danger I was in." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "And I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, but I still want them back. I want to be their mother, not just in blood, but in their lives." David stood ready to cross-examine, but the judge lifted a hand. "That won't be necessary," he said. He closed the letter gently, folded his hands, and looked at all of us slowly, deliberately. "This is one of the most emotionally complex cases I have ever seen," he began. "And before I make my final ruling, I need clarity on one final matter." He paused, then turned to Detective Monroe. "Detective," the judge said, "the court has yet to hear the findings you attempted to present at the previous hearing. Please approach." Monroe rose from her seat at the back of the room, a new file in her hands, thicker, heavier than before. And the look in her eyes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something worse. Something irrevocable. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "this evidence concerns the night Jessica Lawson disappeared, and someone we have not yet discussed." Tommy stiffened. Jessica froze. My stomach dropped. Because the way Monroe said someone made the hairs on my arms rise. As if the story we thought we understood was about to break open again. Detective Monroe's revelation didn't explode, it settled over the courtroom like a storm cloud with its own gravity. Whatever she'd uncovered was so serious, so undeniable that even Jessica's lawyer stopped adjusting his tie long enough to look genuinely worried. But the judge didn't allow it to drag us sideways again, not yet. He reviewed the folder in silence, jaw tight, eyes scanning page after page. Finally, he closed it, slid it aside, and folded his hands. "Thank you, Detective. The court will address this information in due time. For now, I believe we have enough to render a decision regarding custody." The air shifted, a collective inhale, a courtroom full of people preparing for a sentence that would ripple through 4 lives forever. Jessica looked at her hands. Tommy sat forward, elbows on his knees. Lily clutched her rabbit so tightly its stuffing might have shifted inside. I couldn't feel my heart beat. The judge exhaled, slow and heavy. "This case," he began, voice gentler than I expected, "is uniquely tragic. It is not a story of neglect or indifference. It is a story of fear, miscommunication, and the attempts of 2 women to protect the same children in drastically different ways." Jessica's chin trembled. "Maggie Lawson," he continued, turning toward me, "you have shown unwavering devotion. Your commitment to Tommy and Lily's stability, education, health, and emotional well-being is commendable. You stepped into a void without hesitation and provided them with a life any child would be fortunate to have." My eyes burned, but I didn't blink, not now. "Jessica Lawson," he went on, shifting his gaze, "you left in fear, not irresponsibility. Your courage in returning, knowing the battles you would face, is not lost on this court. You were a victim of danger and coercion. The letter confirms the threat against your children was real." Jessica pressed a hand to her mouth. The judge continued, "However, your prolonged absence, regardless of the circumstances, has created deep emotional wounds. Trust must be rebuilt, slowly." He paused, glancing at the kids. Tommy's testimony shows thoughtful maturity well beyond his years. His desire to maintain relationships with both of you reflects his resilience. And Lily, his voice softened, her need for stability and her deep love for Bot. Her mother and grandmother were evident. Lily leaned into me without looking away from the judge. And so, he said finally, this court concludes the following. Time stopped. Primary custody will remain with Margaret Lawson. Jessica inhaled sharply, Tommy closed his eyes, Lily squeezed my arm. But, the judge continued, Jessica Lawson will have supervised visitation. These visits will be structured and monitored by a court-appointed specialist until a suitable level of emotional stability and trust has been restored. Jessica's breath crumbled into a silent sob. Additionally, the judge added, a reunification counselor will be assigned to assist the family, particularly the children, in navigating the emotional complexities of this situation. The gavel struck. It didn't sound like victory. It sounded like a door closing and another one opening into a hallway none of us had ever walked before. Tommy exhaled shakily, Grandma, is it over? No, I whispered, it's only decided. Jessica sat frozen, shoulders trembling, staring at the table as if the words were still sinking into her bloodstream. Her lawyer whispered to her, but she didn't move, didn't nod, didn't speak. It was Lily who approached first. She walked up to Jessica slowly, like a child approaching a wounded animal. She touched her mother's arm. Mommy, she whispered. Jessica flinched at the touch, but then she pulled Lily into her arms, holding her tightly, her sob muffled in Lily's hair. Tommy stood behind them, hesitant, conflicted, unsure where he belonged in that moment. I stayed seated. It wasn't my place to step into their grief. Monroe approached me quietly. Maggie, she murmured, I'm sorry for what this dragged you through. What you found, I asked softly, does it change anything? Her eyes flicked to the sealed folder on the judge's bench. It might, she said. It depends on what Jessica chooses to reveal. Reveal, I echoed. Monroe hesitated, something she rarely did. There's someone, she said carefully, who played a much bigger role in Jessica's disappearance than we realized. Someone she protected, someone she feared. My stomach nodded. Who? Monroe shook her head. She needs to tell you and the kids, it's not my story to force. Before I could question her further, the judge called everyone back to order to explain the visitation logistics. The moment dissolved. Jessica wiped her face, standing on shaky legs. Tommy hovered behind her. Lily clung to her hand. And when Jessica finally lifted her eyes to mine across the courtroom, I saw it. Not anger. Not guilt. But terror. As if Monroe's file had ripped open a truth even worse than the one in the letter. A truth Jessica still hadn't spoken. A truth that somehow might change everything again. The days after the ruling moved strangely, too slow in some moments, too fast in others. Like time itself didn't know how to settle around us anymore. The house felt familiar yet foreign, as if the walls were listening, waiting, absorbing the aftermath of everything we had dragged through them. I woke the morning after the verdict to an eerie quiet, not the peaceful kind, the kind that comes after a storm when nothing has truly settled, only paused. Tommy was already downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal he hadn't touched. He glanced up when I walked in, offering the smallest smile. Morning, he said, voice thin. I poured coffee I knew I wouldn't finish. Morning. For a moment, we just sat there in the sort of silence that felt like gingerly stepping around broken glass. Then Tommy exhaled, Grandma, thank you. I looked up sharply. For what? For everything. He rubbed the back of his neck. For raising us, for being there, for not giving up. The words were warm, but they carried weight too, an apology tangled in gratitude. You don't owe me thanks, I said softly. He nodded. I know, but I still feel like I should say it. His eyes softened, but behind that softness was something heavier. Guilt. You feel torn, I said gently. He didn't deny it. I love Mom and I love you. I feel like no matter what I do, I'm choosing wrong. My chest tightened. You're not choosing at all, sweetheart. You're just learning what you didn't know before. That's not betrayal, that's growing. His shoulders slumped with relief, but it didn't erase the conflict shadowed across his face. Lily handled things differently. She spent the next few days dividing her time like a child walking a tightrope, trying to give equal weight to both sides. Jessica's supervised visits were held at a small counseling center across town. Soft chairs, neutral walls, warm lighting meant to make hard conversations feel less sharp. Every time we arrived, Lily would brighten, hopeful, and every time we left, she would go quiet, twisting the ear of her rabbit until it looked permanently wrinkled. One afternoon, after a visit, she climbed into the car and whispered, "Grandma, is it okay if I love Mommy more some days?" The question hit like a bruise blooming under the skin. "Yes," I said, my voice steady even though my heart wobbled. "You're allowed to love her in whatever way feels right." She nodded, but she looked confused, like love had become a puzzle with too many mismatched edges. Jessica, meanwhile, was unraveling quietly. The verdict had carved something out of her. She wasn't defiant anymore, or angry, or combative. She was hollow in a way that terrified me. She started therapy the day after the ruling, like the counselor had practically urged her in with two hands. She went twice that first week, then 3 times the next. When I saw her after the second session, waiting in the lobby for Lily, she looked smaller, like therapy had peeled away the armor she used to survive the last 13 years. "I'm trying," she said quietly, eyes fixed on her hands. "I'm trying to face all of it, the running, the danger, the choices. I don't want to hide anymore." She'd never spoken like that before, not even as a teenager, raw, unvarnished, without fire to mask the fear. But underneath, her resolve was something heartbreaking. She still wanted her kids. And she still believed I was the biggest obstacle between her and the life she wanted with them. Even now, even after the truth surfaced, she couldn't fully trust that I wasn't keeping them from her. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't have to. I saw it every time her eyes flicked toward me with a mixture of longing and resentment she didn't quite know how to manage. The media made everything worse. 3 days after the ruling, a local news station ran a segment. "Seattle grandmother wins custody after daughter reappears 13 years later." They filmed me through my kitchen window, recorded neighbors offering sympathetic quotes. A reporter messaged me for an interview I never gave. Online comments painted me as a hero, a martyr, a saint. It felt sickening. Every headline praising me felt like a knife carving the distance deeper between Jessica and her children. One night, after a particularly invasive news van parked outside, I shut all the blinds and sat in the dark, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Winning custody felt less like victory and more like survival. A survival that cost us part of our family, part of our trust, part of something we might never get back. Because even with the truth out, even with the ruling decided, the fracture remained. Later that week, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked quietly, "Grandma, what if someone else knows something about Mommy, something she didn't tell us yet?" My breath caught. It was the same question that had been haunting me since the courtroom. "Why do you think that?" I whispered. Lily hugged her rabbit tightly. "Because Mommy cries after every visit, and she said she might tell us something soon, something big." My heart dropped. Jessica wasn't finished. The secrets weren't done. And the storm. It wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't agree to meet her right away. I waited 2 days, 2 long, restless nights of replaying Lily's whispered warning, of rereading the letter until the ink felt burned into my eyes, of watching Tommy stand in the doorway of Jessica's supervised visits like he was trying to decide which way the wind was blowing. But when Jessica texted, "Mom, please, I need to talk to you, not in court, not with lawyers, just us, I'm ready to tell you everything," I knew running from the conversation would only prolong the hurt we were already drowning in. So we met at the one place that felt neutral, the community center room the counselor used for Jessica's visits. Sterile walls, soft lamps, cheap couches that sagged in the middle, a place built for healing but haunted by every cracked open truth that had been spoken there. When I walked in, Jessica was already sitting on the edge of the couch, fingers knotted together, leg bouncing in nervous rhythm. She looked up when the door shut behind me. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I sat across from her, keeping the space between us intact. "You said you had something to tell me." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "There's a lot." I waited. For once, she didn't make me chase the answers. "Mom," her voice wavered, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving, for the lies I told myself so I wouldn't have to see how much I hurt you, for blaming you when the truth was so much uglier." Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "I didn't just leave because of him or because I was scared. I left because I couldn't stand the idea that you'd watch me fall apart. I felt like I kept disappointing you." My breath hitched. "Jessica, I never." "You did," she cut in gently, not cruelly, "not on purpose, but I felt it. Every time I messed up, every time I came home crying, every time you tried to fix me, I thought disappearing was the one decision I could make without disappointing you again." The truth of it cracked open something deep inside me. She continued, voice trembling, "When those men came after me, I wanted to come home. I wanted to bring the kids to you, but I already felt like a failure. And then you threatened court and Mom. It scared me, not because of you, but because it felt like losing the last piece of control I had over my own life." I leaned back, the weight of her words pressing into my chest. "I wasn't trying to control you, I was trying to protect the kids." "I know that now," her voice softened. "Back then I didn't know anything except fear." Silence stretched between us, heavy, necessary. Then carefully, she lifted a manila envelope from beside her. "I didn't want to tell you this," she whispered, "but Detective Monroe already knows, and it's time you do too." My heart thudded once hard. Jessica took a breath that seemed to scrape her lungs. The man I was running from, he wasn't just my boyfriend, he wasn't just dangerous, he had ties to someone else. Her hands shook violently. "Someone who knew about us, someone who made everything worse." I leaned forward. "Jessica, who?" Her eyes lifted painfully to mine. "Your ex-husband," she said. My blood ran cold. "My father," Tommy's voice whispered from the doorway. I turned so fast my neck twinged. Tommy and Lily were standing there, silent, wide-eyed, both pale from what they'd just heard. Jessica's breath caught. "I didn't want you to hear it like that," she whispered. But Tommy was already stepping closer, jaw tight, fear and disbelief woven through his expression. "Mama, Grandpa, he hurt you." Jessica nodded, eyes glistening. "When I tried to leave my boyfriend, he reached out to someone he knew could make me cooperate. Someone who owed him favors, someone who hated that I'd moved back in with Mom after the divorce." I felt myself go numb. "He sent people to the house," Jessica whispered. "The men who took my things, they weren't there for him, they were there for Dad. That's why I disappeared, not just because of my boyfriend, because his people made it clear I wouldn't be safe near you." A sharp aching sound escaped my throat. My children had been collateral in a war I didn't even know I was part of. Tommy looked between us, stunned. "Grandma, you knew nothing about this." "No," I choked. "God, no." Jessica wiped her face. "I wanted to tell you, I was going to that night after the arrestee hearing, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to destroy what little safety the kids had left." Lily stepped toward Jessica, first timid, uncertain, then leaned against her mother's side. Tommy moved next, not quite touching her but close enough that their shadows overlapped. I sat there watching my family shift just slightly toward something resembling truth, something resembling healing. Jessica met my eyes. "I want to rebuild," she said. "With them, with you. I know it'll take time. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I'm done running, I'm done hiding." I nodded slowly. "Then we do it together, but trust has to be earned from all of us." Jessica inhaled shakily. "I understand." For the first time in 13 years, there was no anger in her face, no defensiveness, just grief and a fragile willingness to rebuild from its ashes. The four of us sat there, broken pieces trying to fit into a shape we'd never been before. And just when the moment seemed to steady, there was a knock at the door. Sharp, heavy. Detective Monroe opened it, her face pale. She looked at Jessica first, then at me. "They found him," she said. "My ex-husband." Jessica's tormentor. The man who'd set everything in motion. He's asking to speak to you both, Monroe said, before the case moves forward. My breath froze. Because reconciliation was already trembling in our hands. And now we had to walk straight into the past that nearly destroyed us. I used to think healing would come in a single moment, some cinematic swell of music, some tear-filled apology, some quiet morning where the world finally exhaled and life clicked back into place. It didn't happen like that. Healing came in fragments, in awkward mornings, in quiet afternoons, in small, almost invisible choices we made every day not to fall apart again. In the months after meeting my ex-husband, the man who had set everything spiraling, something shifted in Jessica. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was subtle, like watching someone relearn how to hold their own body without flinching. She started attending therapy twice a week, sometimes 3, real grueling sessions, not the kind you go to just to say you went. The kind that left her wrung out and red-eyed but clearer each time. And strangely, impossibly, the kids noticed. Tommy especially. He started going with her to sessions, not inside the room but sitting in the lobby waiting. He said it made him feel connected, like he was meeting the version of her he'd always wished existed. He didn't phrase it to hurt her, if anything, it hurt him to say it. But Jessica took the words with a raw grace she didn't have before. Their relationship rebuilt itself slowly, like they were testing the strength of the bridge with each step. Some days Tommy would come home quiet, lost in thoughts he didn't want to share. Other days he'd come home smiling, small smiles, cautious ones, but smiles I hadn't seen in years. He'd talk about how she told him stories from when he was a toddler, how she apologized for missing every milestone, how she admitted with frightening honesty that she didn't think she deserved his forgiveness but wanted to earn it anyway. Lily's healing looked different. She moved between us gently, like a child afraid of knocking over something fragile. She would spend the morning with me drawing, baking, doing homework, then suddenly ask if we could drive to see Jessica. Or she'd return from a supervised visit with tears on her lashes and a determination in her voice. I'm going to love Mommy even if it's hard. She said things like that a lot, little proclamations that reminded me she was still trying to make sense of a world that had shifted under her feet. I tried to give them both space, support, neutrality, but neutrality is hard when you've raised a child from diapers to high school transcripts. Hard when you've watched your daughter unravel and mend in uneven patterns. Hard when everything in you wants to protect them even from their own hopes. Some days I let my guard down. Other days I held it tight around me like armor. Because no matter how much progress Jessica made, part of me still remembered the years of silence. The birthdays missed, the nightmares I soothed alone, the times Tommy asked if his mother was dead and I didn't know, God help me, I didn't know what to tell him. But this new version of Jessica, she wasn't the girl who ran. She wasn't the woman who pointed her pain at me like a weapon. She was trying, truly trying to become someone her children could depend on. And sometimes when she was tired or overwhelmed, she would slip. She'd cling too tightly to a moment with the kids or panic when they didn't answer a text right away. But instead of spiraling, she'd take a breath, use the tools therapy had given her, and try again. I saw the work, and even if part of me wasn't ready to trust it blindly, another part wanted to. Slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, it began to feel less like tea. 4 of us were standing in rubble, and more like we were building something new from it. Something imperfect, but real. One evening, months into this uneasy piece, the kids and I walked Jessica to her car after a visit. The sky was streaked orange, the air sharp with early spring cold. Lily hugged her mother tightly, whispering something I couldn't hear. Tommy put a hand on Jessica's shoulder before stepping back, a gesture that was small but not hesitant. Jessica looked at me over the roof of her car. The look wasn't hostile. It wasn't scared. It was human, tired, hopeful in a way she didn't quite trust yet. Thank you, she said quietly, for letting me try. I nodded, just keep trying. She nodded back, then drove off into the dusk. Tommy stuffed his hands in his pockets. Grandma, he said, does it ever feel weird, like we're living in a different version of our family than the one we used to be? I smiled faintly, every day. And is that okay? It has to be, I whispered. It's the only version we have now. We walked back into the house, home but changed, and I realized the truth of it. We were healing, not perfectly, not quickly, but we were. And just as I let myself breathe in that fragile peace, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. No name. No message. Just a missed call. And as the screen lit my face in the dim hallway, a cold shiver ran through me. Because somewhere deep in my bones I felt it. Our past wasn't finished with us yet. Not even close. A year is a strange thing. It's long enough for a child to grow taller, for habits to shift, for wounds to scab over, but it's not long enough to forget. A year after the court ruling, the house feels different, not quieter, not louder, just fuller in a way that has nothing to do with furniture and everything to do with the people moving through it. My ex-husband is no longer a shadow lurking at the edges of our story. The case against him went forward reluctantly at first, painfully all the way through. There were statements, lawyers, plea deals. He's serving time now. We don't say his name in the house. We say things like what happened back then or when everything started. That's enough. The real work was never about him anyway. It was about us. Tommy is 17 now, broader in the shoulders, quieter in the ways that count. He drives himself to school in a beat-up Honda Jessica helped him buy. He texts her more than he used to, calls her sometimes late at night when he's restless and can't sleep. He still lives with me, but there's a new ease when he comes home from a weekend visit with her. No edge, no defensiveness. Just a boy who has realized that his heart is big enough for two mothers and that loving one doesn't mean betraying the other. One afternoon, I'm folding laundry when he wanders into the living room and flops onto the couch, long legs hanging over the arm. "Grandma." "Yes." He looks up at the ceiling like the words are written there. "I used to be so angry at Mom, at you, at everyone for not telling me the full story, for messing it up so badly." I set the towel down. "You had every reason." He shakes his head softly. "Maybe, but the older I get, the more I get that it's not that simple. You were scared, she was scared, nobody knew what would happen, everyone just tried not to drown." I swallow around the lump in my throat. "We did drown a few times." "Yeah," he says with a faint smile, "but we keep coming back up." He rolls onto his side, watching me. "I want you to know something, just in case I don't say it enough." I arch a brow. "Oh, and what's that?" He hesitates, then says quietly, "I don't love you less because I love her more now." The words land gentle and heavy at the same time. "I know," I whisper. And I do. Because watching him walk toward Jessica isn't watching him walk away from me. It's watching him finally walk into a whole truth. Lily is 14 and suddenly all edges and softness at the same time. One day she's a little girl sprawled on the floor coloring, the next she's standing in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair back and asking if she looks more like Mom or like me. "You look like yourself," I tell her. She rolls her eyes, but she smiles. She divides her time with a precision no adult could manage as gracefully. Afternoons with me, evenings with Jessica, weekends rotating like a quiet dance neither of us choreographed but all three of us try to honor. She and Jessica bake now, they text gifts, they share playlists. Sometimes Lily will come home and collapse onto my bed, talking a mile a minute about something funny Jessica said in therapy or how they both cried during a session and the counselor handed them the same box of tissues. "Is it okay that I tell you this?" she asked me once, nervous. "Yes," I said, "I want to know your life, all of it." Now when she laughs about her mom, she doesn't look at me like she's checking for permission. She already knows she has it. As for Jessica and me, we are something new. We are not what we were when she was 17 and slamming doors. We are not the strangers we became during those 13 years of silence. We are not the enemies we pretended to be in court. We are two women who have survived each other. One evening, about a year after the verdict, she comes over early to help me prepare for dinner. The kids are out, Tommy finishing a shift at work, Lily at a friend's house. The house smells like garlic and rosemary, the radio playing a soft oldies station in the background. Jessica stands at the counter chopping carrots, knife moving with surprising confidence. "Remember when you wouldn't let me touch knives?" she says suddenly, a faint smile pulling at her mouth. "I remember when you tried to use one to pry open a soda can," I say dryly. "Some traumas don't leave, Jess." She laughs, really laughs. It wrinkles her nose the same way it did when she was 10. The laughter fades, but the softness stays. Mom, she says quietly, setting the knife down, I need you to hear this. I turn toward her fully. I blamed you, she says, for so long, for everything, for Dad, for him, for the kids. It was easier than admitting I was scared and didn't know what I was doing. Her eyes glitter in the kitchen light. You didn't kidnap my kids, you saved them, and you saved me even when I hated you for it. My chest squeezes. I made mistakes too, I say. I tried to protect you by controlling what I could. I didn't listen enough. I thought if I just pushed hard enough, you'd make better choices. I didn't realize how small that made you feel. She nods, a tear sliding down her cheek. We both did what scared people do. Yes, I say, we did. We stand there, two women in a quiet kitchen, letting years of unspoken guilt and grief finally settle somewhere that isn't between us. She wipes her cheek with the back of her hand. I can't change what I did or what I didn't do, but I can show up now every day as long as they'll let me. And as long as you keep doing that, I say, I'll make room. She laughs wetly. Is that your version of I forgive you? It's my version of I'm trying, I say. Forgiveness is a process, but we're walking it together. She nods, and for the first time, I think she believes it. That night, the four of us sit around the table for a holiday meal, nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, rolls, and a pie Jessica insisted on making from scratch. There is laughter, there are awkward pauses, there are moments where old pain flickers, then is gently placed back down. Tommy cracks a joke that makes Lily snort laugh. Jessica rolls her eyes and steals a roll off his plate. I watch them, memorizing the way the light falls across all of their faces. Not perfect, but here, whole in their own broken ways. As we clear the dishes, I stand for a moment in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room, watching my daughter dry plates while my grandchildren argue about whose turn it is to put leftovers away. A year ago, I didn't know if we'd all survive this. Now somehow, we've made something that looks an awful lot like a life. I think of that first night, the phone call, the empty room, the years of fear and anger and not knowing. I think of the courtroom, the accusations, the letter, the journal, the secrets that nearly broke us. And then I look at my family, my messy, scarred, stubborn family, and the words settle in my chest with a bittersweet clarity. My daughter vanished, leaving her kids with me. 13 years later, she called me a kidnapper, but in the end, we all found a way back to each other, scars and all.